Section 11 of Pirates of Panama, The Buccaneers of America by A.O. Exquemelin, translated by G.A. Williams. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Acacia Wood. Chapter 8, Part 1. Lolonois makes new preparations to make the city of St. James de Leon, as also that of Nicaragua, where he miserably perishes. Lolonois had got great repute at Tortuga by this last voyage, because he brought home such considerable profit, and now he need take no great care to gather men to serve under him, more coming in voluntarily than he could employ, every one reposing such confidence in his conduct that they judged it very safe to expose themselves in his company to the greatest dangers. He resolved therefore a second voyage to the parts of Nicaragua, to pillage there as many towns as he could. Having published his new preparations, he had all his men together at the time, being about 700. Of these he put 300 aboard the ship he took at Maracaibo, and the rest in 5 other vessels of lesser burthen, so that they were in all 6 ships. The first port they went to was Bayaja in Hispaniola, to victual the fleet and take in provisions, which done, they steered their course to a port called Matamana on the south side of Cuba, intending to take here all the canoes they could. These coasts being frequented by the fishers of tortoises, who carry them hence to the Havana. They took as many of them, to the great grief of those miserable people, as they thought necessary, for they had great use for these small bottoms, by reason the port they designed for had not depth enough for ships of any burthen. Hence they took their course towards the Cape Gracias a Dios, on the continent, in latitude 15 degrees north, 100 leagues from the island de los Pinos. Being at sea, they were taken with a sad and tedious calm, and, by the agitation of the waves alone, were thrown into the Gulf of Honduras. Here they laboured hard in vain to regain what they had lost, both the waters and the winds being contrary, besides the ship where Lolonois was embarked could not follow the rest, and what was worse, they wanted provisions. Hereupon they were forced to put into the first port they could reach, to revictual, so they entered with their canoes into the river Zagua, inhabited by Indians, whom they totally destroyed, finding great quantities of millet, and many hogs and hens. Not contented with which, they determined to remain there till the bad weather was over, and to pillage all the towns and villages along the coast of the Gulf. Thus they passed from one place to another, seeking still more provisions, with which they were not sufficiently supplied. Having searched and rifled many villages, where they found no great matter, they came at last to Puerto Caballo. Here the Spaniards have 2 storehouses to keep the merchandises that are brought from the inner parts of the country till the arrival of the ships. There was then in the port a Spanish ship of 24 guns and 16 pedreros, or mortar pieces. This ship was immediately seized by the pirates, and then, drawing nigh the shore, they landed and burnt the 2 storehouses with all the rest of the houses there. Many inhabitants likewise they took prisoners, and committed upon them the most inhuman cruelties that ever heathens invented, putting them to the cruelest tortures they could devise. It was the custom of Lolonois, that having tormented persons not confessing, he would instantly cut them in pieces with his hanger, and pull out their tongues, desiring to do so, if possible, to every Spaniard in the world. It often happened that some of these miserable prisoners, being forced by the rack, would promise to discover the places where the fugitive Spaniards lay hid, which not being able afterwards to perform, they were put to more cruel deaths than they who were dead before. The prisoners being all dead but 2, whom they reserved to show them what they desired, they marched hence to the town of San Pedro, or St. Peter, 10 or 12 leagues from Puerto Caballo, being 300 men, whom Lolonois led, leaving behind him Moses Van Ven his lieutenant, to govern the rest in his absence. Being come 3 leagues on their way, they met with a troop of Spaniards, who lay in ambuscade for their coming. These they set upon, with all the courage imaginable, and at last totally defeated. Howbeit, they behaved themselves very manfully at first, but not being able to resist the fury of the pirates, they were forced to give way, and save themselves by flight, leaving many pirates dead in the place, some wounded, and some of their own party maimed by the way. These Lolonois put to death without mercy, having asked them what questions he thought fit for his purpose. There were still remaining some few prisoners not wounded. These were asked by Lolonois if any more Spaniards did lie farther, or in ambuscade. They answered there were. Then, being brought before him one by one, he asked if there was no other way to town but that. This he did to avoid, if possible, those ambuscades. But they all constantly answered him they knew none. Having asked them all, and finding they could show him no other way, Lolonois grew outrageously passionate, so that he drew his cutlass, and with it cut open the breast of one of those poor Spaniards, and pulling out his heart, began to bite and gnaw it with his teeth like a ravenous wolf, saying to the rest, I will serve you all alike, if you show me not another way. Hereupon those miserable wretches promised to show him another way, but withal they told him it was extremely difficult and laborious. Thus, to satisfy that cruel tyrant, they began to lead him and his army, but finding it not for his purpose as they had told him, he was forced to return to the former way, swearing with great choler and indignation, Mordieu, les Espagnols me le paieront! By God's death, the Spaniards shall pay me for this. Next day he fell into another ambuscade, which he assaulted with such horrible fury, that in less than an hour's time he routed the Spaniards, and killed the greatest part of them. The Spaniards thought by these ambuscades better to destroy the pirates, assaulting them by degrees, and for this reason had posted themselves in several places. At last he met with a third ambuscade, where was placed a party stronger and more advantageously than the former. Yet notwithstanding, the pirates, by continually throwing little fireballs in great numbers for some time, forced this party as well as the former to flee, and with this so great loss of men, that before they could reach the town, the greatest part of the Spaniards were either killed or wounded. There was but one path which led to the town, very well barricaded with good defences, and the rest of the town was planted with shrubs called raquels, full of thorns very sharp-pointed. This sort of fortification seems stronger than the triangles used in Europe, when an army is of necessity to pass by the place of an enemy, it being almost impossible for the pirates to traverse those shrubs. The Spaniards posted behind the said defences, seeing the pirates come, began to ply them with their great guns, but these perceiving them ready to fire, used to stoop down, and when the shot was made, to fall upon the defendants with fireballs and naked swords, killing many of the town, yet notwithstanding, not being able to advance any farther. They retired for the present. Then they renewed the attack with fewer men than before, and observing not to shoot till they were very nigh, they gave the Spaniards a charge so dexterously, that with every shot they killed an enemy. The attack continuing thus eager on both sides till night, the Spaniards were compelled to hang forth a white flag, and desired to come to a parley. The only conditions they required were that the pirates should give the inhabitants quarter for 2 hours. This little time they demanded with intent to carry away and hide as much of their goods and riches as they could, and to fly to some other neighbouring town. Granting this article, they entered the town, and continued there the 2 hours, without committing the least hostility on the inhabitants. But no sooner was that time past, than Lolonois ordered that the inhabitants should be followed, and robbed of all they had carried away, and not only their goods, but their persons likewise to be made prisoners, though the greatest part of their merchandise and goods were so hid as the pirates could not find them, except a few leathern sacks filled with enil, or indigo. Having stayed here a few days, and, according to their custom, committing most horrid insolences, they at last quitted the place, carrying away all they possibly could, and reducing the town to ashes. Being come to the seaside, where they left a party of their own, they found these had been cruising upon the fishermen thereabouts, or who came that way from the river of Guatemala. In this river was also expected a ship from Spain. Finally they resolved to go toward the islands on the other side of the gulf, there to cleanse and careen their vessels, but they left 2 canoes before the coast, or rather the mouth of the river of Guatemala, in order to take the ship, which, as I said, was expected from Spain. But their chief intent in going hither was to seek provisions, knowing the tortoises of those places are excellent food. Being arrived, they divided themselves, each party choosing a fit post for that fishery. They undertook to knit nets with the rinds of certain trees called macoa, whereof they make also ropes and cables, so that no vessel can be in need of such things, if they can but find the said trees. There are also many places where they find pitch in so great abundance, that running down the sea coasts, being melted by the sun, it congeals in the water in great heaps, like small islands. This pitch is not like that of Europe, but resembles, both in color and shape, the froth of the sea called bitumen. But in my judgment, this matter is nothing but wax mixed with sand, which stormy weather and the rolling waves of great rivers hath cast into the sea. For in those parts are great quantities of bees, who make their honey in trees, to the bodies of which the honeycomb being fixed, when tempests arise, they are torn away, and by the fury of the winds carried into the sea, as is said. Some naturalists say that the honey and the wax are separated by the salt water, whence proceeds the good amber. This opinion seems the more probable, because the said amber tastes as wax doth. But to return to my discourse. The pirates made in those islands all the haste they possibly could to equip their vessels, hearing that the Spanish ship was come which they expected. They spent some time cruising on the coasts of Yucatan, where inhabit many Indians, who seek for the said amber in those seas. And I shall here, by the by, make some short remarks on the manner of living of the Indians, and their religion. They have now been above 100 years under the Spaniards, to whom they performed all manners of services, for whensoever any of them needed a slave or servant, they sent for these to serve them as long as they pleased. By the Spaniards they were initiated in the principles of the Christian faith and religion, and they sent them every Sunday and holiday a priest to perform divine service among them. Afterwards, for reasons not known, but certainly through temptations of the father of idolatry, the devil, they suddenly cast off the Christian religion, abusing the priest that was sent them. This provoked the Spaniards to punish them, by casting many of the chiefs into prison. Every one of those barbarians had, and hath still, a god to himself, whom he serves and worships. It is a matter of admiration how they use a child newly born. As soon as it comes into the world, they carry it to the temple. Here they make a hole, which they fill with ashes only, on which they place the child naked, leaving it there a whole night alone, not without great danger, nobody daring to come near it. Meanwhile the temple is open on all sides, that all sorts of beasts may freely come in and out. Next day the father and relations of the infant return to see if the track or step of any animal appears in the ashes. Not finding any, they leave the child there till some beast has approached the infant, and left behind him the marks of his feet. To this animal, whatsoever it be, they consecrate the creature newly born, as to its god, which he is bound to worship all his life, esteeming the said beast his patron and protector. They offer to their gods sacrifices of fire, wherein they burn a certain gum called by them copal, whose smoke smells very deliciously. When the infant is grown up, the parents thereof tell him who he ought to worship and serve, and honor as his own proper god. Then he goes to the temple, where he makes offerings to the said beast. Afterwards, if in the course of his life any one injure him, or any evil happens to him, he complains to that beast, and sacrifices to it for revenge. Hence it often comes that those who have done the injury of which he complains are bitten, killed, or otherwise hurt by such animals. After this superstitious and idolatrous manner live those miserable and ignorant Indians that inhabit the islands of this Gulf of Honduras, as also many of them on the continent of Yucatan, in the territories whereof are most excellent ports, where those Indians most commonly build their houses. These people are not very faithful to one another, and use strange ceremonies at their marriages. Whensoever any one pretends to marry a young damsel, he first applies himself to her father or nearest relation. He examines him nicely about the manner of cultivating their plantations, and other things at his pleasure. Having satisfied the questions of his father-in-law, he gives the young man a bow and arrow, with which he repairs to the young maid, and presents her with a garland of green leaves and sweet-smelling flowers. This she is obliged to put on her head, and lay aside that which she wore before, it being the custom for virgins to go perpetually crowned with flowers. This garland being received and put on her head, every one of the relations and friends go to advise with others whether the marriage will be happy or not. Then they meet at the house of the damsel's father, where they drink of a liquor made of maize, or Indian wheat, and here before the whole company the father gives his daughter in marriage to the bridegroom. Next day the bride comes to her mother, and in her presence pulls off the garland, and tears it in pieces with great cries and lamentations. Many other things I could relate of the manner of living and customs of those Indians, but I shall follow my discourse. End of chapter 8, part 1. Recording by Acacia Wood.